Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into my Week 5 edition of the top waiver wire targets and top streamable defenses. I'm going to dive right into this video. I'm hoping everybody that's been following along with me know the rules by now, but just in case we have any first-time listeners at this point of the season, as I always like to remind people, my top waiver wire targets, these players do have to be available in at least 50% of the rosters on ESPN. So there is a good chance they're available for you, even if the waivers clear tomorrow morning and you're still looking to add players. There might be a good chance you could pick up these players off the waivers later in the week. My quarterback out of the week, I'm going to go with that young quarterback for the Giants, their first round pick, Jackson Dart. He's only rostered on 21% of the rosters right now. Now, he didn't light up the box score as far as passing the ball. He only had 111 yards passing and one passing touchdown. But what I like about Jackson Dart is his rushing ability. He's a very mobile and athletic quarterback. And as you can tell with the offensive play calling that we saw in the preseason, it carried over into his first game for the Giants, where Brian Daboll utilized his rushing ability and calling design quarterback runs. He ran the ball 10 times for 54 yards and a touchdown. So that I do believe that gives him a higher floor. And the reason why I'm suggesting him this week is because he does kind of give you a higher ceiling more than most of the options that are out there that qualify for this list. I'm not saying he's going to be your long season option, but there's that potential if this all does come together that Dart could potentially be a sneaky long season option, but he could at least be playable this week. I know there are 4 teams on a bye, so we do have to start dealing with bye weeks, and he's going against the Saints this week, who have allowed the 5th most points per game against quarterbacks this season. And my running back out of the week, this is a very popular ad. I'm sure you've heard this name suggested, but I got to suggest it too. But the rookie running back for the Houston Texans, Woody Marks, he's rostered on only 33.4% of the rosters right now. This past weekend, he had 17 rushes for 69 yards and a touchdown, and he also caught the ball 4 times for 50 yards and a touchdown. So that gives him 21 touches. It does look like he's going to be starting to take over Nick Chubb in that backfield for Houston. And he does have a great matchup where if you pick him up this week, I think he's a very solid flex play going against the Ravens, who have allowed the most points per game against running backs so far this season. Now, my wide receiver out of the week, can't really play him, but with the injuries to Tyreek Hill and Malik Neighbors, obviously there's going to be people scrambling to try to pick up wide receivers. So if you just need a quality bench option, I would definitely be looking towards Romeo Doubs from the Packers. He's rostered on 36.7% of the rosters. Obviously, he had that big game against the Cowboys. Not like as far as yardage production, just that he found the end zone. He had the 6 receptions for 58 yards and 3 touchdowns on the 8 targets. Obviously, you want to see him get more consistent targets every single week before you trust playing him. But he's worth a bench spot because as we saw against the Cowboys, he is playable at this point when the matchup is right. And then you also got to keep in mind, Jaden Reed was placed on IR last week, so he's out for at least the next 3 games for the Packers. Honestly, I think he broke his collarbone, if I remember that right. So he's probably going to be out for the foreseeable future. We don't know when Christian Watson will be coming off the pup list at this point. So it's going to be Romeo Doubs or Matthew Golden who's going to dominate the targets week in and week out. And obviously Tucker Kraft, who will be competing for targets in every week. But when you got the injuries and Neighbors and Tyreek Hill, and there's not a lot of great wide receiver options, I think Dobbs is at least worth a bench at this point. My tight end out of the week, this guy's been very coming along. Seems like he has a very good role right now in the Jacksonville Jaguars passing attack. It's going to be Brenton Strange for the Jaguars. He's only rostered on 22.6% of the rosters. This past weekend against the 49ers, he had 6 receptions for 45 yards on 7 targets. He's gotten at least 7 targets the last 2 games. If you guys have been following along with me over the past few years, you know when I start to see tight ends that get anywhere between 7 to 9 plus targets, and you start seeing that consistently, that to me screams that he's a viable fantasy option, because at the tight end position, as we know, can you just get me at least 5 points? And if a tight end's getting you at least 7 targets and you're like in a half point full PPR league, as long as he's turning those targets into catches, you're at least going to get to that 5 point mark, and hopefully he can get you the end zone or get you, like he this past weekend, anywhere between 45 to 55 yards. Now, he does not have the greatest matchup as far as what they are facing the Chiefs on Monday night. Chiefs have allowed the 4th fewest points per game, but I do think with him getting those consistent targets thus far, he might be a decent option still if you don't like your tight end at the moment. My flex out of the week, this is strictly just basically for Malik Neighbors managers. I had him in 2 leagues. That completely sucks to lose him at this point of the year. So I am going to suggest Darius Slayton, the veteran wide receiver for the Giants. He's only on 3.7% of the rosters. He hasn't been getting a lot of targets. This past weekend, he had 3 receptions for 44 yards on 4 targets. Obviously, with Neighbors being out of the lineup, I think you're going to start seeing more manufactured targets his way. I think he's going to start seeing anywhere between that 7 to 9 target range. And he does have a good, decent option if you're looking for a wide receiver to play this week, going against the Saints, who are tied for the 10th most allowed points per game against wide receivers this year. So yeah, those are my top waiver wire targets of week 5. Moving into my top streamable defenses. Again, these defenses, they do have to be they do have to have at least 50% roster availability on ESPN. And I haven't done this in a few weeks because I keep on forgetting to, but as a reminder, people, streaming defenses is a high risk, high reward option. Sometimes it works out for you, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm always going for the ceiling anytime I'm playing a defense in my fantasy lineups. My number 1 streaming option this week, I am going to suggest the Cardinals against the Titans. Cardinals are only on 24.7% of the rosters right now. I think this is a high ceiling, high floor defense. That's why they're my number 1 option. First of all, this is a home game for the Cardinals, so I'm factoring that in. And basically why this is a high ceiling game potentially is Tennessee is tied for the 4th most turnovers this year. They have been turning the ball over. They have the 2nd most sacks allowed in the NFL. So they're getting those sacks because their offensive line has not been protecting Cam Ward. And Cam Ward does have a tendency of holding the ball too long, which is also responsible for some of those sacks. And what gives you a high floor option for the Cardinals this week is the Titans are only averaging 12.8 points per game so far this season, which is easily the fewest in the NFL. My number 2 streaming option, I'm going to go with that very good Browns defense, who just, has to deal with that bad offense. So that's why sometimes they're not the greatest defense to stream. But I do still like the Browns this week. They're only rostered on 3.7% of the rosters. They are facing the Vikings this week, and this is going to be in London. This is a London matchup. Now, as far as what I like about this is strictly a high ceiling play. Obviously, anytime you face an offense that has playmakers like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Mason, there's a potential that they could score some points. But then you just look at what Minnesota's offense has done so far this season. They're tied for the 2nd most turnovers, and guess who's going to be their quarterback this week? It's likely going to still be Carson Wentz. We know that Carson Wentz is good for anywhere between 1 to 3 turnovers a game, as we saw in that Ireland game against the Steelers this past Sunday morning. And then what I like about it too is the Vikings have allowed the most sacks in the NFL. After this last week, they lost 2 more starting offensive linemen, so they're going to be entering this game without 3 of their starting offensive linemen, going against a Myles Garrett-led defensive front that also has other guys across that defensive front that can get after Carson Wentz to get those sacks and force those turnovers. And Cleveland so far this season they're tied for the 5th most sacks in the NFL. Moving into my number 3 streaming defense, I do like the Colts against the Raiders this week. Colts are only rostered on 40.1% of the rosters right now. Why I like them, this is a home game for the Colts. The Colts defense is tied for the 5th most takeaways, so they're one of the better defenses in the NFL. forcing turnovers this year. They're actually going to be facing a Raiders defense. I'm sorry, a Raiders offense that is tied for the most turnovers. So you like that, especially the way Geno Smith's been throwing the ball. He's been getting some yards, he's been getting some touchdowns, but we saw those 3 picks he threw against the Bears this past weekend. And they're also tied for the 5th most sacks allowed. And it came out today that their starting left tackle, who is their best offensive lineman, Colton Miller, is going to be getting placed on IR. So he's going to be out for the next 4 games for the Raiders. So they're going to be missing their best offensive lineman. So I'm looking for the sacks and the turnover potential where this could be a high ceiling play if you wanted to stream the Colts this weekend. My next 2 defenses, these are going to be probably 12, 14 team league defenses. Or if you miss out on like the Cardinals, Browns, or Colts defense and you're looking for a roll of the dice defense to play. But I do like the Giants against the Saints. The Giants are only rostered on 7.3% of the rosters right now. We came out, speaking of losing offensive linemen, it came out, I think, yesterday. Cesar Ruiz, the Saints center, is going to be out for some time. I forget what the injury is. He's I'm trying to think out. Yeah, he's probably their best offensive lineman off the top of my head. And he's their center. And who do the Giants have in the middle of that defense? Dexter Lawrence, who's arguably the best defensive tackle in the NFL. So, and then they're facing a very good defensive front that not only has Dexter Lawrence, but they got, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, and then you got the young quarterback in Spencer Rattler. So I like the idea where the Giants defensive front can really rack up some sacks and get you some points if you wanted to stream them this week. And I do think this is a high floor option as well because the Saints are only averaging 16.5 points per game this season, which is the 5th fewest in the NFL. Now this is an extremely roll the dice option for you guys, but I'm suggesting the Dolphins against the Panthers. Dolphins are only rostered on 3% of the rosters right now, and this is just strictly a high ceiling play because the Panthers offense has been so inconsistent. We don't know what we're going to get from them. They could possibly not really score that many points as we saw this past weekend when they played the Patriots, and they have been prone to be turning the ball over this season. The Panthers are tied for the 3rd most turnovers this year. So yeah, my suggestion, go get the Dolphins right now? No, Dolphins would be like a 12 to 14 plus team league streaming option. This would be if you would miss out on the Cardinals. This would be if you miss out on the Browns, the Colts, or if you didn't, or even if you miss out on the Giants. I definitely prefer the Giants defense over the Dolphins this week, but I could see where the Dolphins could be a sneaky streaming option in the deeper leagues this week. So yeah, those are my top waiver wire targets and streamable defenses for week 5. As always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button. Always love to see that number go up as we progress through the season. If you guys are not following me on my social media platforms, please do. You can find me at Cody Talks NFL. Mainly I'm on X, that's where I'm the most active, but I do have an Instagram, and I do cut up these videos and put them on TikTok as well. You guys will get me tomorrow night for my top starts and sits, so I'll see you then. Peace out.